Alrighty, gang. We're dipping into Chapter 6. This stuff is kind of review. I'm expecting that regardless of which professor you had, you have covered some of this stuff before. That's alright. Quick review never hurts. So, we're talking about object-oriented programming, which you've been doing from the very beginning in Java. Java, unlike C++ or Python, just from the ground up, everything has to go in a class, right? Every time you make a new file, a new class. So, textbook defines a class in one way, and I believe I mentioned this in the last lecture. I'm going to define a class slightly different. Class is a blueprint or template, right, for an object that is a collection of data, or you could say variables. Textbooks say all sorts of things, properties, and the methods. And some textbooks call them behaviors that act on the data. Now, not every object has to have data. Not every object has to have methods. But in general, that's the concept of a class. That's why they were created. So the textbook, the PowerPoint, talks about UMLs. A UML stands for Universal Modeling Language. And the UML diagrams can get pretty complex. I don't think we're going to get all that complex in here. I think we're okay with just sticking with a fairly simple one. Here's a complex one, right? Our UML diagrams are going to kind of look like this, except smaller. They're going to have, I don't even like that one. Like this, where you have a list of data elements, the variables, the so-called member variables, and the methods that act on that data. Notice that they're in two boxes, right? If I zoomed in on this, you'd see the name goes in the top box, the variables go in the middle, and then the methods that act on it go in the bottom. Now, it looks like this happens to be a UML more for C++ because I see that they are overriding. They're doing something called overriding an operator, which you can do in C++, but you cannot do in Java. So you just create other operators, other methods that do the same purpose. So I want to create a UML for some concept, like a circle. We're going to make a UML for a circle. Now, what does a circle have? A circle could have an X and a Y position on the screen, right? It could have a radius, right? It could, well, what else could it have? If it was a drawing program, it could have a fill color, a stroke color, a thickness, a pattern inside it, but we're not going to get that crazy. So, if I was going to mess with having an XY position on the screen and a radius, well, let's make a UML diagram. We're going to kind of just simulate a little box with some lines or something like that, right? If you try to draw a UML in Word, and when you type some lines, it might actually convert it into a horizontal rule across the screen or something like that. So what is this? This is going to be a circle class. And really, when you're typing in a UML, you don't have to make it, I don't care if you actually make the boxes look like boxes, whatever. You can just open a text file like I did, or put it in a comment, it's in a Java file. All right, so why not make everything doubles so that we could say, it was at position 2.2 on the screen and it has a radius of 20. Now, we're not going to actually do anything with the X and the Y position this time. The methods I plan on adding are all going to go with the radius. So I could conceivably leave the X and Y pieces off, completely. But I feel like, double X, double Y, except that is not UML notation. UML notation is to put the variable name first, followed by the type. So X is a double, Y is a double. and its radius is a double. And we can add a little prefix in front of them, either a plus or a minus sign, indicating whether that is a so-called public or private member. I know you've seen the word public every single time you make a Java, class, because it always has the public static void main. But maybe I'm gonna make these variables private, meaning that they cannot be changed from the client code, from the driver. They can only be changed, they can only be accessed by methods within the class. Okay, and then I need some methods that modify that data or access it. Like we might want a set radius method, or we might want a set position method, or a get radius method. I'm just going to do radius for now. I'm not going to even mess with x and y. Wouldn't take much time though, right? So these are going to be public methods. We're going to do a set position method. I said I was going to not bother with x and y, but I feel like doing it anyways. And the set position method is going to set the value of x and y, so it needs to have two parameters. It needs to take two arguments. Let's go take a peek at our PowerPoint, see what they have to say about it. Where's UML? Wait a minute. First you don't succeed, you Control F. All right. So here we go. They're not even specifying that these functions are void, but they are void because they don't return a value here, right? They don't have a specified value, unlike these. They don't have a specified type. I might put :void after them just to indicate that. It's okay to kind of expand on the ideas here. And notice that the parameter, same idea. The variable name comes first, followed by the type. By the way, you don't have to be typing this stuff in, right? Might be a good idea to type the code in as I go, but you don't have to do that. You can just fill out a video review form. Okay. Set position is going to take an x, which is going to be a double. Kind of wish I made them ints, right? Just for ease of typing, but whatever. And it's not going to return anything, so it's just going to be declarative type void. Now, how about set radius and get radius? I'm not going to even bother implementing a get position. Honestly, if I really cared about x and y, I would probably declare a point class and make each one of these things a point that could be, passed in and returned from it. So how about a set radius? It just needs to accept one value, right? Because the circle can only have one radius. And it doesn't need to return anything either. And then how about a get radius? It doesn't need to accept a parameter. See, it doesn't need a parameter variable because it's not going to accept any arguments, but it's going to return something. It's going to return the radius. We might want to come back and add like a get diameter or a get area or a get circumference method. Let's add one of those. I don't know. Areas are always fun. There we go. Get area. It doesn't take a parameter. We don't need a parameter. But it is going to return a value, right? We're going to calculate the area, which is pi r squared, and go with it. Okay. So there we go. That's our UML for a circle class. Again, we have the member variables, and we have the member methods. There's also something called a class variable and a class method, which I'm going to not cover right now. So if we wanted to write this up in code, we would do class circle. I'm going to actually, swap over to, NetBeans and actually create this stuff. And I would list my variables, right? And then I would list my methods. I'll come back and, maybe I'm just going to copy all of this and paste it into my Java document. right? You don't have to do that, but I'm going to put it in as a comment on my main Java file. Whoops, looks like I have a project going. I'm going to make a new project. And by the way, some folks are having trouble installing Ant. When you click next, you get an error message. I hope you're not. But you can actually get away with doing, Maven, or you could try Gradle. You just may actually have to create the file and type in the public static void main yourself. Hopefully you know how to do that. If you've been doing that with a text editor all along, then you'll feel quite comfortable. I'm going to stick with Ant. If you have to do it with Maven or with Gradle, then it's okay. You don't have to redo it, with Ant when you get the chance to do so. Okay, what am I going to call this? I'm going to call this Lecture B. You feel like playing along? Great. When I create the main class, I don't know if you can quite see what I'm doing here. I'm going to remove the package declaration from the front of it. You don't have to do that, but I don't want it to be in a package. I just want it to be at the root level, the default level. Although NetBeans gives you a little warning when you do that. It says you should not put them there. Well, I feel like doing it anyways. It makes it easier for me to grade, guys. I can just copy and paste this into, TextPad and compile it. I guess all I have to do, if I don't do that is, remove the package statement myself. But still, if you're going to post this code on the internet or share it with somebody, it's kind of nice for it not to have a package. If they feel like it being a package in a subdirectory, they can add that themselves. Okay, so I'm going to finish this up. Here's my class. No, it's not. That's Lecture A still. I'm going to go to Projects, find Lecture B, find Source Packages, Default Package, Lecture B, and double click on it. Oh, maybe this is it over there. Yeah, it is. So apparently I have this little pane that I don't need here. Get rid of the start page. Okay, so I'm now into it. I'd kind of like for you to put your name and stuff up at the top of every file you write. It's a circle class. I don't care so much about the format of it. I know that I have a standards document that specifies a very specific format. You could put the date as well if you felt like it, right? In a professional setting, it might not be strictly necessary to put the date, right? But let's go. I don't care so much about that. Again, the specs document may specify this is what's called a so-called Java doc comment. And we'll go into Java doc comment a little bit, but I'm going to remove that for now. Same for this. Okay, but I am going to need a circle class. The standard, the recommendation, is to put every class in its own file. So if I was a good programmer, I should come over to Default Package, click New Java Class. When I'm demonstrating code, I get in the habit of actually adding the class right in the main file. That way I only have to upload one file. Now again, this is kind of lame. In a professional setting, you should put every class in its own file. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and put it here. So this is my circle class, and if you remember, my UML specified that it was going to have an X and a Y and a radius value. Now I could just do this, double X, comma, Y, comma, radius. Right, but if I wanted the ability to add comments to each variable, I would list them separately. I would put double X, semicolon, I would explain what X is, X position, right? Just kind of to be terse and succinct on the screen. I think I am going to leave it like that. Again, I'm not doing what I would consider professional programming doing that because I really should be documenting. I should be adding comments to every single variable I create. So when you write your first class, or whatever, when you do this homework assignment, I don't mind if you leave off those comments this time. But we're going to get pickier and take more effort, at following good structure as we go along. Now these are supposed to be private variables. I'm going to leave them off being private. By the way, in C++, every member you make is private until, specified otherwise, but that's not true in Java. In Java, they are essentially public variables. Slightly different than a true public variable. We'll go into that later. Okay, so there's my class. I'm going to go ahead and use my main class to create a circle. So the main class is the driver for this, or the client. I like the term client better than driver. I think the textbook uses the term driver. So I won't ask on an exam what the difference between a driver and a client is, because I prefer one term, the book uses another. This is the client / driver for the circle class, demonstrating creating a circle object. All right, let's do it. Circle C1, that's a creative name, equals new circle, parentheses and parentheses. And I'm going to set the x and y value of the circle. C1.x equals 3. C1.y equals 4. Now I can do that because I did not mark this is private. It's not protected. Not private, not protected. That means that we can access those member variables right here inside main code from our client. I'm going to follow good programming practice. This is one of recommendations for creating a good class, and I'm going to start making a list of recommendations. Recommendations for creating a class. 1. Data private. 2. Methods public. Unless you have a reason to create a private method, you may run across a situation where we want to do that. Minor recommendations. Name should begin with an initial cap. Name of the class should begin with an initial cap. Now, when I go back, I will probably reiterate these recommendations for creating a class, adding on to them, and I may stop recommending that one. Right, it should become second nature to you to always create a class with an uppercase letter. But for now, I'm going to leave that there. Yeah, that's just today's. And we're going to add one more, which is getters and setters for the member variables. We will explain what those are. But you saw it already, right? Set position, set radius, get radius. I might have wanted, I probably should have created a set x and a set y separately. Maybe I'm going to go ahead and modify my UML to that effect, right? Set x, and it only takes one variable, and another one called set y. Because maybe I just want to change one of them without changing the other. Looking good to me. Let's go ahead and modify our class to look a little bit more like this. For one thing, I'm going to make these variables private. We're going to see what happens when we do that. Private. Double. So I'm changing this line inside the circle class. Private double x comma y comma radius. And since we're using NetBeans rather than a pure text editor, it's already flagging these as errors. It's saying x has private access in circle. That's what the private keyword means. It means it cannot be manipulated directly from the calling code. It can only be accessed from methods inside the class. And there are reasons that you want to do that, which I'm going to skip for now. It's called data encapsulation, or black boxing is another term. And make it a little black box. You don't know what's going on inside the black box. Data encapsulation is the term I prefer. So here we go. If we're going to do and change the value of x and y, we have to provide methods that change those. Now colloquially, I call them getters and setters, but the textbook definition for them is whoops, I forgot to make that a comment, accessors and mutators. Getters and setters is such a succinct way of putting it, such a clear way of doing it. And I kind of like using it that way, but this is the textbook, right? We got to use fancy Latin terms. Accessors and mutators. Mutate because it changes it, sets it. Accessors because it gets the value, accesses the value. All right, so we need to add our accessors and our setters. Let's add the setters first. As a matter of fact, our UML over here didn't even have getters for get X and get Y. It should have them. Just like we have a get area and a get radius, we might want to add the get X and the get Y to make a complete one class. So I'm going to do that. Get X doesn't take any parameters, but it returns the data type of X. Get Y doesn't accept an argument, so it doesn't need a parameter variable, but it does return something. There we go. All right, now I'm going to add these things into my class itself, switching back to NetBeans. Okay, so public void set X, double X. Right, now it looks remarkably like this. I'm just going to copy that as a comment. Then I'll probably delete it, but just so that you can compare on screen right now. Right. Plus means public. Set X is the name. Void is the data type. Inside the parentheses is the parameter variable list. We have one parameter, which is X, and it's of type double. Let's get rid of that. So, what are we going to do? We're going to set the value of this object's X. Whoopsie, not there. This dot X equals X. We'll explain more about the this keyword later. I am really fond of the this keyword. You will see me use it even when it's not strictly necessary. But here it actually is necessary because this variable has the same name as that. So to distinguish the two, we need this reference right there. Just make it a habit. Use the this reference where it's applicable. Pretty much all the time for every member variable. That's just my recommendation. Even if it's not strictly necessary, which a lot of the time it's not. One reason I like it is because I can type this dot and it pops up all of the member variables up at the top, right? And if my member variables are long, you know, it's nice to just be able to click on it. But in this particular case, we don't need to be changing anything else. We're just going to set X. You know, it might be nice to provide default values for X, Y, and radius. They probably default to 0, but I like specifying default values. I could just go and do that, right? X equals 0, Y is equal to 0, and radius is equal to 0. About the time I've done that, this line is getting so ugly that I really wish these were on separate lines. So forgive me for making this modification. Private double X equals 0, semicolon. Private double Y equals 0, semicolon. Private double radius equals 0, semicolon. Okay, I'm going to need a setter for Y, and a getter for X, and a getter for Y, and then our get area method. Let's do this, the getter for X. Public double get X. Now, since it's not passing in an argument, we're just returning it. Return this dot X. Now, sometimes when I'm trying to save space on the screen, although you won't see this in the textbooks, I don't see anything wrong with it. I may put the getters and the setters with everything on one line, like that. The syntax can get a little bit gnarly. People, feel like putting a semicolon out here where it's not correct. But makes it a little bit more succinct. I kind of like looking at it like that. If you feel like writing it out like that, that's also fine. I'm going to go ahead and do that for both of them. And I'm going to even space it out a little bit. Okay, right? You don't have to do that. That's getting fancy, for fanciness sake. Not strictly necessary. Not necessary at all. Standard programming practice would be to not put it all on one line, right? To put, this on its own line, that on its own line. I need to do the same thing for the y's. Now, honestly, I could just copy and paste these and change all the x's to y's, right? That's a quickie way of doing it. I'm going to build it, make sure I haven't introduced any errors. Well, I do have errors down here, right? Down here, I cannot change the value of x because it was a private variable, but I could call the setX value. So c1.setX, capital X, parentheses 3, in parentheses semicolon. And I'm just going to comment this one out to get rid of the error message. All right, so you saw what I did. To try to fix this, let me try to get the code all on one screen so that you can see it. Notice that this class is above our public class method. Public class. This matches the file name. Circle should go in its own class called circle.java. I could, cut that, paste it into a new class called circle.java. All right, you can pause it, get it to build, right? If I build it, I should make sure it works. My output window seems to be missing, so I'm going to do window output, make sure it works. Your output window probably shows underneath the code. I don't mind it being over here because I can get more lines of code on the screen at the same time. All right, I'm going to set the value of y now. And I have to have a setter for it. I mentioned I was just going to copy and paste my two methods and change them to y, right? Why is it underlining them? Because I already have methods, that match these. You can't rewrite the same exact method with the same name and the same parameter list. Okay, so you see what I'm doing. I just copied those lines and I've changed all the all the x's to y's. Notice there's a little warning here. The field radius can be final. The reason it's saying it can be final is nothing in here changes the radius. Well, we're going to allow the radius to be changed, so I'm not going to come up here and fix this. What does final mean? It just means a constant. It's what other languages use the constant keyword for. Okay, so I have a set y value. Why don't we come down here and invoke that method. c1.setY 4. And I need a getRadius and a setRadius method. I need getters and setters for that variable as well, because I want to be able to call c1.setRadius down here, right? Can't do that yet. I'm going to come up here. Public, wait, why don't I just copy again, right? There's nothing wrong with doing that. I'm going to highlight those two lines, copy them, paste them, and then change the y's to the word radius. There goes my cute spacing, right? They're not lined up in columns anymore. So change that y to the word radius, that y to the word radius, that y to the word radius. And do the same thing on the next line. I'm going to line these up again just to make them a little bit prettier. Okay. Now, I did not provide in my UML a set area. People get in the habit of thinking that they need to provide a setter for every value. Why is there no set for area? We don't have an area variable. We don't need an area variable. Our area is always going to be calculated from radius. The tendency is for people to think that if they have a getArea method coming up, they have to put that in as a member variable. We could do that. Don't type this. I'm going to delete it. Private double area. The problem with doing this is that if you set the radius and you set the area, well, you would have had to calculate the area in the first place to get that to work. And then you change the radius, the area is no longer valid, right? So we don't want to put that data in here. We just want it to be calculated every time it's needed. So I'm deleting that. I'm going to come down here. So public double get area, parentheses in parentheses. Now, I'm not going to put this all on one line. It's important enough, and it may involve multiple steps. I'd rather all it be like that. All right, so between my curly braces, I'm going to calculate the area, and then I'm going to return it. So double space area equals, and what's the equation for area? It's pi r squared. Right. Is it just math.pi? Yeah. Math.pi, caps on the pi, times the radius. This dot radius times this dot radius would work. Or math.pow, which means to the power of this dot radius, comma 2, in parentheses, semicolon. And then I'm going to return the area. You could separate this into 3 lines. Double area, semicolon, area equals math.pi. Or you could just return math.pi times math.pow. You don't need to actually declare that variable and return it all. We could just, don't do this if you're following my code exactly. Do that right. Could do that. I prefer to create the variable, assign it a value, and then return it separately. The reason I do that is so that if I'm using a debugger, I can check the value of area before it gets returned. All right, I believe I have matched the UML. I believe if I go over here, I'm going to see that I have the 3 variables and the 7 methods. Let's see if that's the case. 3 variables, 7 methods. Well, let's write a little bit of code that actually uses the get area, right? So down here, I created a circle. Let's call get area, right? So double area equals c1.getArea, parentheses in parentheses. And since we went to the trouble of getting all this, why don't we print it out? Right? System.out.print line, parentheses, quote, c1's radius equals, end quote, plus c1.getX, parentheses, in parentheses. And then another closing parentheses and a semicolon. The same thing for Y. And as a matter of fact, the same thing for area. I could get rid of this temporary variable and just print it out right on the spot. For some reason, I feel like doing it in this separate fashion. But it's still faster to do it like this. I'm really fond of copying and pasting. Not entire blocks of code and keeping it like that, but if it's a matter of just, taking something, changing it, because it's repetitive otherwise. So the C1 radius is not C1.getX. Why in the world did I type that? Right? This should be radius. That was moronic. Okay, make sure you change your line if you're typing along to make sure that it says radius there and radius there. Now, let's print out the area of it. So I'm going to modify my copied line to just print out the value of the area that I calculated here. And again, you see that I could have called C1.getArea right there. Let's test ourselves out. Test our code out. Now, if this was going to be a really cool program, I could ask the user to provide the value for the radius, and then I could set, print some stuff out. I could use a scanner to let them type it in. I'm going to skip it because this just proves the point right here. All right, I built it. Hammer and broom didn't seem to provide any errors. Build successful. Going to run it. All right, if the radius is 10, the area actually is that. That is correct. So your homework is going to be to take this circle class and add a few things to it. I'll provide the text for the circle class in the notes, so you can use that. Or maybe even in the homework assignment itself. Yeah, that'd be a better idea. Modify the circle class to have a get circumference. I don't care if you just call it get circum. And get perimeter, right? I don't care if you shorten it to get param method. The formula for circumference is 2 times pi times radius. The formula for perimeter is just 2 times radius. So that's the first part of the homework, right? That's part A. Part B is, I may as well use correct capitalization. Modify the main method to print the value of the circumference and the perimeter by calling the objects methods. Part C is to add code to main that creates a second circle. C2 sets the values and prints the results, the area, perimeter, and circumference for that circle as well. All right, that may not take you too long. Hopefully not. If you get stuck on it, please contact me. All right, so I'll post this as notes for you. You can work on the homework. Homework's going to be due next week, right? We're off to a slow start, but now we're going to have 2 or 3 assignments every week from now on. At least 2, since we're going to have 2 lectures a week. Coming up next, I'll probably have you create your own class, like a square class, right? And you're going to pick the variables that go in it, or I may specify the variables I want you to use. But that'll probably be tomorrow's lecture. All right. Hope this made sense. Please contact me with any questions. You should be reading Chapter 6. Look through the PowerPoint and enjoy the homework. Go ahead and fill out a project review form and upload it. And if you created the Java file, upload that if you want as well.